me now to discuss further about what's going on with this potential nuclear testing. We have retired Marine intelligence officer and host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. Great to see you.
So as we're looking back at the timeline, the U.S. military actually hasn't tested nuclear weapons in more than 30 years. Why would they want to start testing again, and who would handle that? Would that be the Department of War, the Department of Energy?
Well, it's kind of a cooperative thing, actually. Department of Energy does all the nuclear stuff, and they have they work with nuclear weapons and things like that. So technically, it is DOE, but it's always been done in close cooperation with the Department of Defense, now the Department of War. So it is kind of a joint thing that's done, and it involves a lot of stuff I won't get into because it gets a little complicated. But it would be very difficult to pull this off. We don't really have a testing facility. We had one north of Las Vegas. It's been basically mothballed forever. It would take a long time to get that back up to speed. Then there's a lot of questions about the environmental impact of that, because we found that there was residual underwater radiation that was getting into the underwater aquifer. And then there's even talk about what they do above ground. Well, we haven't done above ground testing since the early 60s. So there's a lot of work to go into that to just make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first thought. Even if it happens underground, I don't know the science behind it, but gosh, it would be scary to think about it getting into our drinking water or something, like you said there. Nevada Democrats are slamming the announcement from Trump, and they're warning that from 1951 to 1992, the Nevada National Security Site was the primary location for explosive testings of nuclear weapons, and that the impacts are still being felt today. Earlier, NewsNation spoke to Democratic Congresswoman Dina Titus with our Laura Engel. Listen.
You know, we've been testing here since they put bombs in our backyard back, 50 or so years ago. But to start it again would not only put us back in the crosshairs of radiation exposure, but it would start off an arms race internationally. It would be a terrible thing to do.
So what risk is it to Americans?
Well, I don't know if it'd start an international arms race per se, but the risk would be residual radiation, contaminating, as I mentioned before, the aquifer. Also, it would be escalatory. Right now, there is no testing. So when the president actually says he's going to test, kind of keep it commensurate with other countries, well, we've kind of already done that without doing anything, because China's not testing. They haven't tested since '96. Russia's not testing. North Korea was testing, but they haven't tested several years. And this might be something that's being said to put pressure on the Chinese, to put pressure on the North Koreans to make sure that they don't do any more testing. I don't know if what's being said behind closed doors. That may be something they're thinking about. But right now there is no testing. So it's an interesting policy change, but I just don't see much coming out of it unless somebody else starts testing.
Okay, well, Russia's warning that if the U.S. starts testing nuclear warheads, that they would potentially follow suit. Russia's also denying claims of having already tested those nuclear weapons in October. So dive deeper. Could this be the start of a possible new arms race?
It could possibly be. I'd hate to see that happen, but things that have happened is Russia has a what they call a nuclear-armed cruise missile thing that they've been testing. It's not just nuclear armed, it's nuclear powered, I should say, and very hazardous. Potentially if that thing goes down, it would contaminate where it hits. They also have a torpedo, long range torpedo, nuclear powered, which is supposed to create a radioactive tsunami in other ports and stuff. So these are some of the things. I think this is kind of a way to put pressure on Russia to actually curtail the testing of those programs. It's a very interesting game of, some would say, four-dimensional chess, but with strategic consequences.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that, and it's interesting the timing of when the announcement came out, too, right? It was just before Trump announces, just before his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. So four-dimensional chess, perhaps, as you say. Retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Anna.